Words are merely utterances, noises that stand for feelings, thoughts, and experience. They're symbols, signs, insignias. They're not truth. They're not the real thing. Words may help you understand something. Experience allows you to know.
Hello and welcome to this series. My name is Roel, but you may call me Ro. I am a spiritual life coach and guide on topics ranging from health and nutrition to metaphysics and psychedelics. We are going to take a deep dive into the Complete Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch. We're going to go over it chapter by chapter and talk about the various lessons and implications of what is being said. But throughout all of this, I want you to keep in mind that this is a channeled book. And with all spiritual channels, we have to keep in mind that a channel acts as a filter. And filters sometimes don't let everything through or can even alter the information. Similarly to how the setting of a psychedelic experience affects the experience drastically. And another thing to keep in mind is that on the path to self-realization, we can learn from books, channels, and all sorts of outside sources of great teachings. But we have to remember that above all, the ideal, most important source of truth is direct experience. With that said, I must say that this book has blown me away with how it essentially summarizes almost all of my personal conclusions and findings from dozens of books and almost decades of research. And for anyone only just starting your path of self-realization, or veterans of knowing themselves, this book will offer some amazingly valuable wisdom. So let's go ahead and start listening to this. I believe the first few chapters are pretty quick, so we'll see. Maybe we'll do a few per video.
Oh, this is Neale Donald Walsch. I'm not a minister, I'm not a theologian, I'm not a scientist or philosopher. I'm a regular person, just like you. I don't have a college degree or a long list of impressive credentials. I've lived a life in which I've made more than my share of mistakes and in which I've faced many of the same day-to-day challenges and questions which you have faced. But by 1992, these challenges had increased to a point where I found myself living in complete frustration. Nothing in my life seemed to be working. And in utter despair, one middle of the night, I wrote an angry letter to God. I wanted to know why my life wasn't working, what it would take to get it to work, to get it right. This all took place just before Easter of that year, and when I finished my letter, something incredible happened. Something which has changed my life and the lives of thousands of other people forevermore. I began hearing answers to the questions I had been asking in my letter. And I began writing what I was hearing as fast as I could. When the answers ran out, I asked more questions and got more answers. Naturally, I began asking questions as fast as I could think of them. And I got answers as fast as I could write. What started that night, a very uncommon dialogue, continued for nearly a year. I remember the very first exchange I had in this dialogue. I had just finished with my letter. To my surprise, as I scribbled out the last of my bitter, unanswerable questions and prepared to toss my pen aside, my hand remained poised over the paper as if held there by some invisible force. Abruptly, the pen began moving on its own. I had no idea what I was about to write, but an idea seemed to be coming, so I decided to flow with it. Out came,
Do you really want an answer to all these questions, or are you just venting?
I blinked, and then my mind came up with a reply. I wrote that down, too. Both. I'm venting, sure, but if these questions have answers, I'd sure as hell like to hear them.
You are sure as hell about a lot of things, but wouldn't it be nice to be sure as heaven?
And I wrote, What is that supposed to mean? Before I knew it, I had begun a conversation, and I was not writing so much as taking dictation.
So what we can immediately notice here near the end is we already have three different personalities considering this book, and going forward it will mainly be three personalities. So we have Neale Donald Walsch, and then a female representation of the entity he is channeling into, and a male representation of that. Which flow in and out of each other because they're essentially the same thing.
What you are about to hear is a reading of a large portion of that dialogue. I hope you receive benefit from listening to it. The dialogue begins with a very simple question, actually. How does God talk? And to whom?
I talk to everyone.
All the time.
The question is not to whom do I talk.
But who listens?
First, let's exchange the word talk with the word communicate. It's a much better word, a much fuller, more accurate one. When we try to speak to each other, me to you, you to me, we are immediately constricted by the unbelievable limitation of words. For this reason, I do not communicate by words alone. In fact, rarely do I do so. The most common form of communication is through feeling. Feeling is the language of the soul. If you want to know what's true for you about something, look to how you're feeling about it. Feelings are sometimes difficult to discover, and often even more difficult to acknowledge.
This is so true in my perspective. When we live in a society where most people are not in touch with their feelings or don't take their own feelings seriously. If you don't know what happens when you do not take your own feelings seriously, they are stored in your body and they become trauma. So emotions not fully experienced become trauma that's represented in the body that can either lead to karmic situations or just simple health implications where you can get ill or you make worse decisions for yourself. And I really like how he mentions communication instead of talking, and mentioning that the type of communication that we receive from what we would call God is in everything. And I'm sure he'll go further into that, so let's continue on with the book.
Yet hidden in your deepest feelings is your highest truth. The trick is to get to those feelings. I will show you how. Again, if you wish. I also communicate with thought. Thought and feelings are not the same, although they can occur at the same time. In communicating with thought, I often use images and pictures. For this reason, thoughts are more effective than mere words as tools of communication. In addition to feelings and thoughts, I also use the vehicle of experience as a grand communicator. And finally, when feelings and thoughts and experience all fail, I use words. Words are really the least effective communicator. They are most open to misinterpretation, most often misunderstood. Why is that? It is because of what words are. Words are merely utterances, noises that stand for feelings, thoughts, and experience. They're symbols, signs, insignias. They're not truth. They're not the real thing. Words may help you understand something. Experience allows you to know. Yet there are some things you cannot experience. So I've given you other tools of knowing, and these are called feelings. And so too, thoughts.
Absolutely. The map is not the territory, even though you can conceptualize it and see it and symbolize it and communicate it in words. That doesn't know you know it experientially. So words and symbols don't get you to the experience. As I said before, direct experience is the highest level of understanding of truth. And it's almost the only way to really experience truth. Really beautiful that mentions it. Let's continue on.
Now, the supreme irony here is that you've all placed so much importance on the Word of God and so little on the experience. In fact, you place so little value on experience that when what you experience of God differs from what you've heard of God, you automatically discard the experience and own the words, when it should be just the other way around. Your experience and your feelings about a thing represent what you factually and intuitively know about that thing. Words can only seek to symbolize what you know, and can often confuse what you know. These, then, are the tools with which I communicate. Yet they are not the methods. For not all feelings, not all thoughts, not all experience, and not all words are from me. Many words have been uttered by others in my name. Many thoughts and many feelings have been sponsored by causes not of my direct creation. Many experiences result from these. The challenge is one of discernment. The difficulty is knowing the difference between messages from God and data from other sources. Discrimination is a simple matter with the application of a basic rule. Mine is always your highest thought, your clearest word, your grandest feeling. Anything less is from another source. Now, the task of differentiation becomes easy, for it should not be difficult even for the beginning student to identify the highest, the clearest, and the grandest. Yet will I give you these guidelines. The highest thought is always that thought which contains joy. The clearest words are those words which contain truth. The grandest feeling is that feeling which you call love. Joy, truth, love. These three are interchangeable, and one always leads to the other. It matters not which order they are placed. Having with these guidelines determined which messages are mine and which have come from another source, the only question remaining is whether my messages will be heeded. Most of my messages are not. Some because they seem too good to be true. Others because they seem too difficult to follow. Many because they are simply misunderstood. Most because they are not received.
Joy, truth, and love. Now, that's not the type of God we all desire and the kind of world that we would like to experience. This was the introduction to this series. Now, there is 26 and a half hours of this book without my commentary. So we're going to be in for a long ride. These were chapters 1 to 4, and this is the introduction to the series. Please check the description for the link to the playlist where you can find the other chapters. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you enjoyed this and you're enjoying this series, like and subscribe. And I want to wish you a beautifully bright day, week, month, year, life. This is Ro, and I'm out.